Hi, everybody. I'm going to let everybody take a minute to join us as everybody's coming in to our webinar room. I want to make sure to give everybody a second to join. Okay. So welcome to our Maine Artificial Intelligence webinar series. My name is Sarah Howarth. I'm a member of the AI Steering Committee and faculty in the College of Education and Human Development here at the University of Maine. And before we start, I would like to thank the UMaine AI Initiative for planning this event and the IEEE Maine section for sponsoring this webinar. It's now my great pleasure to introduce our panelists. First up, we have Jamie Basham. He is a professor in the Department of Special Ed at the University of Kansas, and his work is focused on developing future-ready learning environments that are equitable, beneficial, and meaningful for all learners. He has several federally and privately funded research and technical assistance projects, including the Center for Innovation, Design, and Digital Learning, CIDL. He is well published and has given hundreds of talks and services on he's had served on various national and international boards for journals, companies, and educational organizations. So welcome, Jamie. Justin Dimmel is an associate dean for academics and student engagement at the University of Maine. He earned his PhD in math education at the University of Michigan, and his research is based on a mixed methods study of communication practices that are used by teachers and students when doing proofs in high school geometry. Prior to earning his PhD, Justin worked for 5 years as a high school mathematics teacher at adventure-based boarding schools in New England and the Bahamas. He has a broad interest in how people learn to represent mathematics and communicate their mathematical ideas to others. My wonderful colleague, Sarah Flanagan, is an assistant, soon-to-be associate professor of special education at the University of Maine. Her current interests and work with teachers are on evidence-based practices and written expression for students with and without high incidence disabilities, and universal design for learning, technology, and teacher prep for literacy. And finally, we have Miss Jill Conley, who is a valued faculty member at RSU 26 here in Orono, Maine, and she's specializing in special education, IEP compliance, and Chapter 504. Her well-rounded experience across multiple areas of special education, along with her time as a gen ed teacher, demonstrates her commitment to student success and well-being, and she is dedicated to supporting students, teachers, administrators, and all stakeholders and the continued growth and enrichment of the school community. And Jill has taught 2 of my 3 students. My 3 children. I am Sarah Howarth. I'm an associate professor of special education here at University of Maine, and I'm also on the UMaine AI Steering Committee. So with that being said, I have some questions for our panelists and hoping to give them each time to answer each of the questions. And I would like to encourage all of you who are listening in to go ahead and put your questions in the Q&A box, and I will bring them up as they come, and we'll answer them as you ask them. So please let me know if you have any questions. Go ahead and pop them in the Q&A box. But the first scenario, it's kind of a scenario and a question that I want to pose to the 4 of you. Justin actually brought this up. So the scenario is you're a high school history teacher.
Okay, Sarah, I'm so sorry. Can I provide a little bit of
Oh,
context?
here. Yes, please.
So
Of
hi,
course.
it's okay. So when Sarah and I were talking about this, one of the things that I mentioned is just, as Sarah said, I'm an associate dean in addition to being an associate professor. And something that I've seen, I don't know, at least probably half a dozen times in the short time that I've been an associate dean, is a situation where a professor suspects a student has been using AI on an assignment when they should not be using AI on that assignment. And I have seen this play out in several different ways. And my sense right now is that we do not know how to handle these situations right now. And so that the purpose of the scenario was to try to like start a conversation around like when something like this happens, like what are some actual things we could do? So that's enough table setting. Thank you, Sarah.
All right. Are you okay if I just read the scenario you shared with me? Okay. I just want to make sure I'm not like sharing something I shouldn't. Okay.
It's not,
So
it's fictionalized,
it's
fictionalized.
it's fictionalized. So you're a high school history teacher. Each week at the start of the first class, students submit a one-page reflection on what they learned in class and from the readings during the prior week. And you've explained to students that the purpose of these essays is for them to show that they are engaging with what they are learning. You are interested in their ideas, their processing, and the goal of the reflective essay is for your students to develop the skills of synthesizing and transforming what they are learning into their own ideas. You have stressed that these essays are supposed to be their work and only their work. In particular, you have stated that they should not use generative AI to assist with the writing of the essays. One of the students has been turning in essays that seem oddly formal. There's no clear personal voice in the essays, and they don't seem like they were written by a high school student. You suspect that the student may be using generative AI to write their essays. What should you do about your suspicions? We have so much we could talk about in that scenario, but I'm going to let Jill go first because I'm sure she's had to deal with this at the high school. And then we'll each get to chime in.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it certainly is something that comes up. And I've been in meetings with teachers and some of my students who kind of didn't fully understand things like plagiarism and using other people's work, and that by doing AI, it's sort of that same sort of thing. And so I think right now, we're dealing with it on a case by case basis. I think AI is a little bit more tricky, obviously, because we're simultaneously trying to, encourage the use of it in places where it is hugely beneficial and where it will, kind of change the way we can do things in the future. But certainly, having to deal with a student that's just flat out putting a little bit in and saying, write me my essay. Those are issues. And eventually we'll have to have disciplinary policies like we do for the plagiarism. I think, I'd be interested to hear kind of how it's impacting at the higher level, because I think some of the students I work with may not have you know I've been out of the classroom for a few years, first of all, and this is kind of new to these past couple years. So, and also the level of students that I worked with in those direct ways. I work with several students for executive functioning type things, but others that I'm working more academics, that may not have been something that they would have accessed. So um, that's pretty much what I can say about that right now.
Okay.
Yeah, I would love to hear.
All right. Sarah, do you want to chime in?
Yeah, so full disclosure to all of our webinar friends, I research writing and I view writing as student voice, whether it is a picture that describes something or it is their dissertation. And so what the approach I've taken both with my own students when I teach our professional writing course and even smaller assignments, and I know this doesn't totally answer the question, is really emphasize the writing process so that it's okay not to be perfect. So we start with planning strategies. We have editing built in. There's room for feedback. And I've noticed with my students particularly that having that process emphasized has really reduced their thought to use AI. But at the same time, I've also been really purposeful with showing them how to use AI as a tool for the writing process because I look at it like a calculator. Like you could do as much math as you want, but if you don't know what it means to add, the calculator is just, something that looks funny on your desk. And so I really emphasize that, if they're going to use AI to brainstorm topics for their research paper, how are they using it? And then how are they taking that and putting it in their own words? or if they don't understand, like I was talking with a student and they were reading a pretty complex meta-analysis. So I encourage them to copy and paste the methods into AI as like a tool because, you know, we are not always there to answer questions and ask it to be like, what does this mean for the classroom or whatever it is. So I guess my answer to that with my love of writing and supporting students' writing process is for those writing assignments to have it be a process and have it be a place where feedback is given and that's okay. And then teaching students to harness the tool of AI as something that can help them write, but not replace their writing. And that's really the position I've taken with all of my courses. That AI is here. It's not going anywhere, but how can we use it to help us in this process versus replace what we're doing? And I'm not sure, I went off the topic of the question, Sarah, but I'm not sure if that answers your question.
Yeah, it's just like, what do we do about it? That's the question.
Mhm.
Justin, do you want to chime in? And then I'll let Jamie share with what he's seeing at the national level.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So thank you all. So I think Jill and Sarah, I appreciated the sort of nuance of each of your responses, like work with students where they're at, meet them on a case by case basis. I think that's great. I think I'm interested in the kind of the cat and mouse aspect of it though, right? So like in the way this has been playing out, and again, this I don't think this is betraying any confidence as everything has been fictionalized here. This is kind of a a cross synthesis view of like different things different email threads I've kind of been dropped in on as professors are dealing with this with students. How this is typically gone is the professor has a hunch. The professor calls the student into their office and says, you've used AI for this assignment. I'm giving you a 0, right? And then the student like panics, writes their advisor, writes anyone they can, like, oh my God, I didn't use AI. Like, I don't know why they think this, et cetera, et cetera. And then in most instances, the professor just like backs down, right? So there isn't really like an investigation or like a litigation, if you will, over whether or not AI was actually used. In some instances, not in all, but in some instances when this has happened, and I've kind of been on the thread or been in the background, just out of my own curiosity, I've taken this allegedly AI generated text and I've put it into something like GPT-0 or one of the various other services that are now saying they will tell you whether text has been generated by AI or not. In many instances, GPT-0 says they are 99% sure or 100% sure that the text was AI generated. So no, I haven't done anything with that, right? Like it's not as if I've reinserted that into the email thread or tried to fact check things or tried to rip open wounds for students and faculty if they've, navigated something that's very difficult. I just find it very interesting, and so if we're, and when Sarah and I were talking about this, even as a prompt, like, we were wondering, like, well, not that does it even matter, but more, should the teacher, did the teacher make the mistake of trying to expect students to do this kind of work without using AI? Should they have asked the student to do something else, right? Like if they're really interested in that student's thinking, should the teacher have had a discussion with the students, right? Make it like almost like what we old school oral examinations, where students are just in a discourse with you. That way, that you're getting what the student is thinking right there in that moment. So I just think it's a very kind of complex tapestry of things. And I think that right now, there's always been cat and mouse games in school. That's what school is. It will never not be that just sort of the way that grades, credit, credentials, financial remuneration, all of it is kind of tied into this system where students want grades. They don't necessarily always want to do the work that's going to get them the grade, right? So there's nothing fundamentally new about that challenge. I do think that like the AI piece of it and what would it look like to investigate and have a fair process for investigating whether or not a student is using AI? I don't know that we have that right now. And so I'm curious to see what people think we should do in those situations.
So Jill has her hand up. Jamie, do you mind if I let her weigh in first?
That's fine.
I just had a couple of things that kind of came to mind when you were, let me lower my hand, excuse me.
Yeah. High five.
A couple of things from, the perspective of the high school. One is kind of, you had mentioned, the professor and the student. And in high school, there's this other very big person, if you will, and that's the parent. And you are making these, assumptions, or you're 99% sure, and then you've got a parent coming in, and talk about a teacher backing down. And it's really difficult. And I think that speaks to we were just maybe getting to a place where we would have kind of that investigation for the plagiarism piece, and then here comes AI, and it's like, well, hold on, but it seems like that will be the other thing I wanted to mention, because it just came to mind, was this an assignment that one of our English teachers did, where they were to write their own essay, and then write another one using AI and AI generated, and compare the two and look at those things like you were talking about, Sarah, the voice, which is really just not there a lot in AI. And so they had talked about that and breaking that down. So that just came to my mind too, which was something I couldn't think about when it was my turn to speak, but there we go. But the parents, that process of it, because it can become very, the kids are offended. The parents are like, how dare you?
Yes. I don't mean to laugh, but yes.
No, absolutely.
And
So,
there.
yeah. Okay. I'll let you.
Thanks. Jamie, do you mind in your response weaving in UDL and how this might fit in?
Yeah, I definitely will do that. So, like Sarah said, I run a national center right now for the U.S. Department of Education. And what we're doing is supporting an understanding of use of technology in primarily post-secondary, with a focus on personnel preparation, teacher preparation, doctoral research preparation in education. But it's probably the number one question we probably get, and it's almost on a daily basis, is how do I catch people using AI? And the answer that we usually give disappoints people, because what we know right now is there's not a very reliable and valid way to catch people using AI. The scan systems that are out there, time and time again, if you look at the actual research on those scan systems, they don't do very good at doing that. In fact, they pick up different types of writing more than other types of writing. And we can kind of get all into that sort of conversation. So a couple of things that we've been recommending. One is look at multiple means of measurement, look at multiple means in which way students can submit content. At this point in time, and this again will change in time, but at this point in time, having students, for instance, submit a reflection video in that scenario would be a lot harder to fake than a piece of writing. And that's just one little example. But the conversations I think we need to have in the education system, whether it's K-12 or post-secondary, relate to teaching people new skills. So some of the conversations we're having right now are around this thing called cognitive offloading. We all use this concept of offloading cognition at various times, whether we use a calculator, whether we, have Google tell us how to get to a place or whatever. We use this all the time, and we make decisions as to when to use it, when not to use it. And we need to teach our students the same things. And what I've been spending my time talking to schools about, and actually my undergrads and grads, is, at some point that struggle of learning is important. And at some points it's not. Now we have to determine how to do it, when to do it, et cetera. And so that human AI collaboration piece is critically important to think through and figure out when do we make the decision to kind of struggle a little bit, and when do we make the time to say, look, I just need to get this done and do it. The other piece that goes into that conversation, I think, is one that I've tried in my class. And so I think of myself as an educator, as a designer, right? A designer of learning environments, learning experiences. And if I want the students to struggle, I can make them struggle. And so one of the challenges we've been doing is thinking about, in fact, I have a midterm that's releasing next week, which I'm sure we'll get feedback on from the students, and we encourage them to use AI, and I encourage them to report it. In fact, I've done this in multiple classes now where, just like just like companies have bug bounties, and I don't know if people are not in the tech field, they don't know this, but companies have bug bounties where if you find a bug in their software, they encourage people to report it, and they will actually pay people for bug bounties. And so I kind of do the same thing in my class. If you can use AI to cheat on something, submit it, get it graded, and then report that you cheated, but you have to show me how you cheated, and I'll give you extra credit. And so I want to, because that shows me where people can overcome the barriers pretty easily to learning. And because there is a point where you want people to overcome the barriers that are unnecessary in the learning process, but you also want them to have that friction occasionally to go through that process as a human. So, but it is one of the number one questions we get, and there's not a real good answer to it right now. It's a very human based process, like the idea of catching someone and someone admitting it, etc.
So to kind of button up this particular topic before we move on to the next one, another thing that I have a conversation when faculty talk to me about it is I talk about creating assignments that can't be done by AI, right? Since we're creating, a human workforce, right? That's the whole purpose of our education system. You need to give our students tasks that can't be done by an AI, which is going to require a lot of effort on teachers and faculty, right? Because they are used, we all get used to our routines and how we teach our assignments and always use the same ones, and we might have to shake those up a little bit. So I think providing options for how students can show what they've learned is probably going to have to happen. Even I teach almost all of our classes online, and the good old discussion post, where you post your submission by Wednesday, respond to 2 other people by Friday, and it almost always goes, they wait for that first person to post, and then everybody else chimes in like seagulls. I agree with what you said about XYZ, and what a wonderful point you made, blah, blah, blah. And there's really no meaningful conversation. So I'm starting to make my students make video or audio commentary because they can't fake that. And they have to stop and think about what they're going to say before they hit record more than they would just shooting off a text-based discussion post. So we did have a few questions come in, but they were more about like, okay, what's next? So I'm going to move along. And the one question that came in, people wanted to know about using AI to help with writing IEPs and setting goals. And I know, Jill, you are experimenting with that. So I'm going to let you talk a little bit about that. And then we'll go around.
Yes, definitely. I have a few things to share. One of the things, if there's anybody around here on here that has to write IEPs or anything like that, it can be tedious, it can be time consuming, and you're doing it all while you're also teaching a full course load, and you have, the kids who are need you to come put out a fire for them behaviorally, and everyone coming to you because you're the expert in the school, and all of those things. And so one of the things that we always are trying to do is streamline things for people, while also we just had our audit, our special ed audit, and they look at our our IEPs and our files and look for things that are compliant versus best practice and all of these things. And so one of the things we have talked about is in the IEP, there is this, what they call the how statement. And it's about talking, what are the deficits for each, for your student, because each IEP has to be very specific, obviously. What are the deficits? And the way they want it written as best practice is kind of in a bullet form, right? So in encoding is it, and long and short vowel sounds. It can be as simple as those kinds of things, all the way up to making inferences and things like that. And so the idea is you put the bulleted lists, and then you have to have this how statement. And this how statement has been like the bane of our existence. At one point, it was like, had to be this big fancy thing. We felt like the state was trying to trick us. Now they're trying to make it simple, but you still have to include all this anyway. So one of the things that I did at one of our staff meetings to try to make people less scared was show these tools that I just found with a simple Google search, and that is using AI to turn bullet points into a paragraph. And I think that this is a good way in which, when you were talking, James, about teaching them when it's appropriate to use it. We do that all the time, right? Yeah, like you said, whether it's using Google Maps or using a calculator, things like that. We have learned that through our process. When we were learning, though, it wasn't as prevalent. These kids have it right in their face, so it makes it a little more challenging, but teaching that is going to be a big part of it. So this is a tool. This is a time when I feel like it is appropriate. I think I figured out how to share my screens. I just want to quickly show you one little example of how this has worked for our how statements or in our IEPs. If people have no idea what the heck I'm talking about, then I will make this quick and we can move on to more pertinent information for you. But those of you who have to write IEPs, you're going to know what I'm talking about. So am I sharing my screen already? Or?
Yes, you are. Yep.
Okay. All right, great. So I'm going to pull it up. I did a simple search for, I literally typed in bullet points to paragraph. And you can put in your bullet points. So just to, let's see, this person has no sense of fashion. Their hair is always messy. These are like, I don't know, social deficits. Struggles with social nuance. Okay. And basically you would put in yours. Of course, these are going to be more academic or functional specific. These don't matter, but that was just what I came up with at the moment. And then you're going to click generate. You can put your tone in here, again, which is very cool, because also scary, because people can say, you know, maybe make it sound like I'm a high schooler that doesn't really fully understand, and then maybe the AI will do that for them. But and when you click generate, then it creates this beautiful, you know, paragraph about what what
Lack
you
of fashion
said.
sense.
Isn't this great? And puts it into the exact how statement. How is this impacting them in their day-to-day access to the general education curriculum? So the individual in question displays a distinct lack of fashion sense, often opting for clothing choices that fail to align with current trends or personal style. All right, that was AI generated. I didn't say anything about current trends or personal style. So it took
So that could be an example of bias, right?
right.
AI can give you biased information.
Exactly. So there's this piece where, of course, and again, part of the teaching is there have been stuff, and of course I put like very judgy things in here, so that's my own fault. But if I was putting in like, you know, trouble with long and short vowel sounds, it probably wouldn't be very biased. But what you can do then is take this and say, you know what, yeah, that sounds like this kid, this works for me. But what it has given our teachers is a starting point and a place where they feel like it's not too overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
I know we've got to move on to a bunch of other people. The only other thing I wanted to talk about generally, because my actual position title is District 504 Coordinator. And one of the things we've talked about and that I'm working on is I'm working closely with Sarah Henry, talking about accommodations in college. Things are very different once you get to the college level. Things that are acceptable and honored as accommodations in high school simply cannot logistically be accepted there. So we've talked about how we can use the language here as our kids get to be in 10th, 11th, 12th grade. And one of the things we've talked about is this note-taking tool, and it's called Glean. And I probably am not going to have time to show you it, but that's another way that we're using AI. It dictates or transcribes what the teacher is saying, and then people can take that text, manipulate it in a way that either brings it down a level for them so that they can understand it, helps them kind of organize their thoughts and things like that. So that was the other thing I just wanted to quickly mention. I can put my email in the chat in case anyone wants to reach out and if there's anybody on here that is actually interested in that, and I can certainly answer any questions specifically.
Okay, I think there's just the Q&A, there's not a chat. So
Okay,
then if it's okay, I'll send your email to anybody that reaches out.
perfect. That would be great. Okay,
I don't want to send your email to the world.
okay.
Yeah.
Thank
So Jamie, do you want to weigh in on the IEP goal part?
I put a link. CITL has resources on it. If you go to ciddl.org, and just search IEPs, we have resources on that. I also gave a URL in the answer,
Okay, thank you.
but happy to talk about it if people want. Not necessary.
Okay, I can tell you that there has been a recent article that just came out in the Journal of Special Ed Technology on this, IEPs in the age of AI. And what's interesting to me, the very first sentence of the article jumped out at me. As of 2022-2023 school year alone, there were 7.5 million students ages 3 to 21 who had IEPs. So that's 7.5 million IEPs that teachers are writing. It's a lot of work.
Yeah, it's a ton
You know,
of.
that's a ton of work. If you think that each one takes about an hour minimum, usually much longer to draft. IEP goals, having a thought partner like ChatGPT or any of the other Gemini, Claude, there's so many different options now. Just having a thought partner to help you develop SMART goals that are observable, measurable, because I think the clearer you can make that IEP goal, the easier it is for the teacher to figure out how they're going to teach it, right? What does it look like? How am I going to measure this, right?
So I'll say, I teach a AI machine learning class this semester. I'm teaching one, and I think what we're going to start seeing, and not just because I know not everyone on the call is interested in IEPs and students with disabilities, but I think what we're going to start seeing, obviously, the holy grail of education, if you will, is personalization. And so I think as we get dog getting up in the background there, as we get further down the line on this, and one of the resource I shared in the chat or when I answered the question was around a multi-agent system. So I think we're starting to see agentic systems, and an agentic AI system is a system that can go off and accomplish goals for you based on direction, right? So it has some autonomous sort of level of understanding. And I think what we're starting to see are prototypes of systems that can go off and help support IEP development. But more to the point, it's going to support more greater personalization in the education system. So where every single student, no matter if you're in college, in K-12, et cetera, could have a personalized learning plan. And AI can help kind of create that. Now, if you also happen to be a student with a disability, you will also have an IEP that also supports in that sort of work. I'm watching the dog behind me.
Okay.
But I think this is what we're going to start seeing more and more of. And we've done some coverage of this and some of the work that's emerging in this area. I think it's an exciting area, but it's going to take a lot of work. And I think special education as a whole is interesting because I think in some ways it's provided us a system in the K-12 environment to think about what would it really look like if what are the barriers to individualizing education for all learners with disabilities, and how would that scale? And I think it kind of gives us a means of that. And I think that's what AI is going to start pushing us towards.
Thank you. Sarah, did you want to weigh in?
I think I'll hold off for now until because I see there's some questions in the Q&A for you.
Okay, yeah, we've got some questions coming in. Anne Finney shared a resource. I don't know if everybody can see that, to an ed tech book, Introduction to AI and Ethics in Higher Ed. But if not, we can share that after with the participants. And we have a few like high level questions that I want to that are still open that I want to bring up. The first one, which I think would be great for Justin and maybe Jamie to tackle, this is from an anonymous attendee. I'm a corporate consultant and can attest that AI is replacing human generated material whenever, wherever possible. How are higher ed institutions strategizing for lower demand for white collar workers, even in creative corridors? Associate Dean.
At the risk of speaking out of turn, I'm not sure that there's a lot of top level strategy happening right now, at least not that I'm part of. I don't think that there's anything. I don't think there's anything beyond just bandwidth issues to explain that. I think everyone is aware that AI is coming. Everyone aware is these changes are happening. I also do think that there has been a little bit of sense of, well, somehow knowledge creation, knowledge generation, like the work that we do is not going to be AI. But as we're saying that, right, like the last 2 weeks, we've seen the deep research tool be announced. This is like ChatGPT's $200 per month subscription fee service. And this is a service that, Jamie was just talking about multi-agenting and multi-agent systems. And so apparently I haven't used this system because of the $200 price tag, maybe folks on the call have, but essentially you can give it like a postdoc or kind of a PhD level research task, like something you might ask, someone that it has a PhD in history. Hey, I want to know something about, this classic arguments, I don't know, Madisonianism or something or other, right? And you can give the deep research a prompt. It might take 5 minutes, it might take a half hour to think about it. And what it will come back with is something that is comparable to what, say, like a team of highly educated humans working together might be expected to produce over like 3 or 4 days of intense work. So that's happening right now. So yeah, Sarah, to answer your question, I don't know how much the people in higher ed are strategizing about things right now. It does still seem like we are waiting to see what is happening. Where is this going to end? Like and I think the new reality is that it isn't ending anywhere. This is just going to keep going. And so I'm interested in kind of the strategic discussions and how do we prepare people for the realities of the question referred to white collar work, which I think that's part of it. But I've been thinking more of it in terms of digital versus analog work. So essentially, we're creating this world where anything that a human agent can do interacting with some kind of digital information portal or terminal, AI is now going to be able to do that. And so what does that mean? Does that mean that have we inadvertently created a world where human-centric digital work is essentially useless and has no value? And instead, like, human agents for now, until we have robots fabricating, robots, like humans for now can be focusing on things that involve kind of multimodal, manual, dexterous coordination, like artisans, musicians, so it's just interesting to think about like where are we, what kind of world are we creating right now? And then so to answer the question, I don't know that we're having a lot of like these are the specific visions we have for a world where AI has infused every kind of digital interaction. We probably should be. And I imagine soon, one way or another, we will be, or we're probably going to be out of business.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll jump in. Yeah, I think it's the Wild West right now. There's institutions that are beginning to think about these things. There's some that have begun a deeper dive on this. But this is somewhat predicted. So what most people aren't realizing is that while we've had a lot of growth in AI, transformative growth in AI over the last few years, this really over the last 10 to 15 years, we've kind of been able to anticipate what's happening now. And in fact, in 2020, the World Economic Forum had made the comment in one of their reports that 65% of the students in elementary school in 2020 were going to work in jobs that didn't exist at that time. So I think one of the things that we have to do as humans, as we always do, is we have to adapt and think about kind of what the future looks like. the idea of, and one of the examples I use is this little device that's in my hand, which is a mobile phone. Uh, and we have an entire app economy now. And we have influencers and all of these like words that are common in everyday language that didn't exist even 15 years ago. And that was done with essentially a mobile device and some simple compute through social media. And what we're going to see with the transformational change of AI is going to be 10 times, if not 100 times that.
Mm.
So I do think we have to start thinking about it, but it is the idea that we have to foster sort of adaptivity, lifelong learning in what we do. We have to really think about what the value is of higher education because there is a huge value in it. Um, and we have to start defining those things. IES at the U.S. Department of Education has a solicitation out right now that's due in next week, in fact, that is a national center to investigate the impact of Gen AI on post-secondary instruction. And those are the types of research projects that are critically important. We need national centers, statewide centers, and emphasis on what does human AI collaboration look like in the future, and how do we prepare for it? And we need a lot of effort and investment in that work right now, because it is the Wild West right now. We need some really solid, sustainable research in that area.
Thank you. So I'm going to pivot a little bit. Sarah Flanagan, I'm going to ask you to talk a little bit about your rubrics, but to cue it up, Sarah has been working with her students since she teaches writing and writing instruction interventions. She's been using AI to help develop rubrics based on tasks and tools for students like checklists. But as you're listening to her, I want you to think about how you might use it in whatever assessment of any content that you're trying to create an assessment for. Think of how you might be able to replicate what Sarah's doing. So with that,
Yeah.
I'm going to cue you up.
Yeah, thanks. So,
And
a
you
little
can
bit.
share your screen if you need
Oh,
to.
perfect. So a little bit more background on this kind of idea for my students who are largely K-12 teachers actually came from a meeting with some faculty members in STEM about how their TAs don't really know how to evaluate writing. I mean, because they're not, if you're even, my preparation was in education. I don't know that I ever had a class on how to make a rubric and came from education, much less someone who perhaps is in maybe physics and they've never really been taught how to give undergraduates feedback on lab reports. And so this kind of really spurred kind of a conversation about how can we harness AI to help give students feedback. And so I'm going to show you the example that we did in class, or I guess what's today? Thursday, Monday, that I shared with my students. This was for K-12, but I've also been playing with this also for higher education, but because I don't know physics, I'm going to show you my K-12 example. Share. And I will apologize, I'm still getting used to switching to a Mac if I don't totally share correctly. Okay. So sorry, I'm going to move all of our little heads. And I'm going to make this bigger. So, as I said, my students in class are teachers. So we use the example of we want to create a writing rubric for a paragraph. So to kind of demonstrate to them how I would narrow down my evaluation method, I left it broad. So, in ChatGPT spit out, here's a simple rubric for writing a paragraph. And I looked through this, I'm like, okay, I really don't like the word improvement. Or maybe there's wording that I don't like. So maybe the word conclusion, I wanted to say something different. So I then provide modifications to my prompt. So, modify this rubric for a student who is working on staying on topic and including supportive details. So now my rubric has changed to be on those things. If this was a lab report for a physics class, it might be, modify a rubric to focus on the scientific process or how they discuss the findings, or if they've discussed the findings in a way a layperson can understand. So we went through that, but what I really, really like, sorry, I'm going to scroll. I hate when people scroll on Zoom. Um, is that ChatGPT can also create examples for me. And this is really where I love the use of AI for whatever level of education, because oftentimes teachers at any level aren't really sure what something looks like in a really vague rubric. So it wrote me a paragraph, it gave me the breakdown. Um, but what is even nicer, sorry, I'm going to scroll, is one thing that we really talked about the STEM TAs was that they're not sure where to start with giving feedback. And so for my pretend paragraph, I wrote my favorite animal is a puffin. They live in Maine, they eat fish, they fly fast, they are great. And I asked ChatGPT to score my paragraph based on the rubric. And what is great about it, it scores it. And I'll be the first to admit I am 100% not comfortable with using AI to totally grade things. 100% not comfortable. Because again, writing voice, no matter what it is. But for someone, a teacher, for a TA, for a professor who's like, okay, I know this isn't good writing, but I don't know how to I don't know how to help the student. ChatGPT gave me some awesome prompts that I could use to support that student. So, like, if I am really not sure how to um, kind of prompt the student to give more details, I could take the feedback ChatGPT gave me and tailor it to the student, you know, in their written comments and what I'm giving to them. But that's really how I have framed AI use for evaluating things. And again, I played with this for large literature reviews, for lab reports that I don't understand. But what I really appreciate for it again is that for someone who is unsure of how to evaluate something, whether it is a 7th grade paragraph or, you know, my graduate students' final projects, ChatGPT can give me a starting point to evaluate it, and then also a starting point to give students feedback to help them support their process. And I know, Sarah, was there anything else I should share? Because I know I was trying to keep an eye on the time.
No, that looks great. Do we have any questions? I haven't seen any come in about what Sarah's sharing, but
I
I
did.
can,
You
go
go ahead.
ahead.
I
No,
want to make one comment, Sarah. I think you were very sincere, right? And like saying, hey, I'm not comfortable using AI like this, right? But it is, I think, an
It's an
interesting.
option.
Well, it is just an interesting glimpse into this dystopia, right? Where we have students using ChatGPT to write essays that teachers are then using ChatGPT to grade. And so we have this kind of like education happening with no human beings.
Mhm.
Who'd say that they're not actually learning or engaging anything, right? Because it's not that simple. Like even engaging with ChatGPT, et cetera, we can get in all that. It's just a really interesting thing. And I think some of the consequences of what it's almost like we've short-circuited the digital information human interaction loop. I don't know that we've realized that that's what we've done yet. We've kind of
Yeah.
taken the legs out of the last, like 50 years of the kind of digital revolution. And we're now confronting it with a snake eating its tail. I don't know if we're ready for that. I'm not sure
What
how we're
happens when
going. Yeah, like I'm not sure how we are adjusting to that. Like in real time, the way that we seem to be adjusting to it is like we're not thinking that deeply and that like globally about what the implications of this are. I mean, some people certainly are, but
I'm
like,
starting to for
yeah,
sure.
I was
like,
what happens when ChatGPT grades itself?
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Um,
So
I was
what,
like, and I'll clarify that I do not make any assumptions about anyone who uses AI to grade. It's because I research writing that it really I have a very big moral dilemma, but I fully support like in my students and faculty I've worked with, they also really appreciate that they can use AI to give them a starting point. They're like, we have no idea how to evaluate writing. How do we get started? And AI certainly support that. But yeah, my next question for my next study will be what happens when ChatGPT grades itself.
well, I think these are important ethical considerations. We could almost have 3 more entire webinars just on the ethics. Like it can do this. Should we? like, because that's every time I discover a new thing that it can help me with, I'm like, ooh, is this okay? Maybe it's my Roman Catholic upbringing, but I wanted to take a couple minutes. There are two tools I wanted to show you in the next 10 minutes. If people haven't seen them before, I know some of you are well aware. But there's one tool called Notebook LM that somebody was actually asking about in the chat that I promised I would show you. Let me find my go. So there was actually, it's no longer there, but there was a AI report shared in the Office of Educational Technology that I had used in my classes to talk about how students might use AI tools as assistive technology, right? So there's this tool that we have access to in our Google Suite here at the University of Maine, and I'm sure if you have Google Classroom, you have access to that as well. It's called Notebook LM. So I had uploaded this May 2023 guide that was developed when Mr. Cardona was the secretary of the ed department, and it's intense. Like it's clunky. It's kind of heavy for like the average elementary school teacher to read. So what you can do as a tool, and my youngest son uses this now because he has attention deficit disorder and anxiety to help him with his early college classes. He will upload his notes from class or some of his readings, and he can create a notebook based on it. So you can either add your own notes or you can ask the PDF questions or you can develop like a briefing doc and study guide. You can develop an FAQ, but the great thing is you can develop an audio podcast and it sounds like two human people explaining this document. So the podcast that it developed for this, and again, it's not me talking. It's not two humans talking. It's actually the AI created a voice for itself to summarize this document. I can't remember, Jamie. I think it's like a 40 to 80 page document. Like it's lengthy,
Yeah.
but they summarized it into like a 16-minute podcast, which is really all my students who are teachers really need to listen to. So I'm just going to play a minute or two so you can hear what it sounds like. But I see this as a great study tool, just like you would listen to a podcast of anything, right?
Welcome to another deep dive, everybody. Today we're tackling AI in education. You sent us this really comprehensive report from the U.S. Department of Education.
Yeah.
It's kind of like their roadmap for navigating this whole
Totally.
exciting and sometimes a little scary world of AI in education. And I think you're probably trying to wrap your head around what AI really means, like for the future of learning,
Absolutely.
teaching, even like what it even means to be well educated in the world where AI is so
Huge questions.
prevalent. And that's what we're going to try to unpack in this deep dive. We've got some pretty eye-opening examples from this report.
For sure.
Key recommendations, even some like tensions that I think are going to have you thinking long after this deep dive is over.
Oh, absolutely. It's a fascinating report. And what really struck me was their emphasis on AI as a tool.
Okay.
You know, like they're really trying to move past the hype
Yeah.
and really ground the conversation in the practical realities of what AI can and cannot do in school.
Okay, so let's get into that. What is AI in education then?
Right. Beyond the headlines about robots replacing teachers.
Right, exactly.
It's really about sophisticated automation powered by data.
Okay.
One example that's already making waves is Khan Academy's AI-powered learning platform.
Okay, yeah, I've heard of that.
They're using
Okay, I'm gonna stop it there. Because I just think it's pretty amazing, as well as it equally fascinates me and horrifies me that it has the ability to do that. But from a universal design for learning perspective, it is mind-blowing how it can summarize a document like that. And I think to create the podcast, it only took about like 5-10 minutes to create that.
And
James.
Sarah, if you jump in on that, the other thing you can do now is on their beta is you can interact with it and personalize it. So you can ask it questions. You can ask the podcasters questions about something specific you're interested in, and they'll directly respond to you. So it's pretty amazing.
Yes, I did try that and that was creepy. I did that actually when I was talking to some of our Maine coaches, our professional coaching network, like live with them. I was like, oh, this is new. Let's try it out. What do we want to ask it? And everybody was like, whoa, it talks back to you. So, I mean, obviously there's lots of things that we can discuss about that, but I see a question came in. Hang on. Okay, AI assisted grading is not a magic wand that can replace human judgment and expertise. Yep, I don't think we're saying that. Maybe we need to consider the interactive nature of resilience and the role of care in teaching and restoring balance in the education ecosystem. Okay, does anybody want to comment on that?
I like that, Gemma, and that speaks directly to the College of Education and Human Development at UMaine. Like our mission is like placing care and that kind of human, social, emotional connection at the core of learning and teaching. And we see that in our work with schools and in communities. And so I think you're onto something there that like this the inadvertent, kind of like devaluation of all of the kind of digital bells and whistles that, like Chat GPT is now, or not Chat GPT necessarily, but AI is now calling into question, creates this opportunity to take a second look at the things that we know have worked for thousands of years, like the human connection, human care, like human attention to detail, developing wisdom, judgment, all of the kind of skills that you need to be like a fully functioning and, just sort of person with a sense of like self and fulfillment. Like there's an opportunity for all of that stuff to kind of like come, I think, pouring back in from the margins. We've been in this sort of optimization race in education where we're trying to, whatever, tweak test scores and the things that we can measure. And not that that's not important, but like there's this whole other dimension of like being like an educated full person. And we could be investing in those things now too.
So I'll respond with an article if people are so mathematically inclined and they want to read it. There's an article that came out last year at some point that the notion of where these Gen AI models collapse because of their recursive nature. So it kind of leads to, if I teach a philosophy of science course too, I'm kind of a geek, but uh, it goes back to Hume's induction sort of issue that we're going to run into here at some point. And so I put it on Gemma's, I put a link to the article in Nature, but it's a mathematical notion of when these models kind of basically collapse on themselves because it's just a continual recursive thing. So if we all as humans just continually rely on them and don't add anything to them, that's what's going to happen.
You may open some portals or something. You just never.
But like, and on that point, it's like right now, I think there's very much this like shared sense that AI is happening to us. Like I, for one, didn't ask for any of this, but if this isn't happening already, it's going to happen soon where like organized networks of people are going to realize that we are not like helpless in this. And, like people are not going to want to make their life's work, their thoughts, their written word, like available to these models to like mine and regurgitate and then spew back out into the world. And so like, it's going to be interesting to see, do we have people saying, no, like I'm not interested in this. Like I'm going to be writing my letters by hand or whatever it might be to kind of like not feed this juggernaut that is just sort of running amok right now.
I think that we will have people who definitely are like, no, I don't want to have anything to do with AI, just like we were like when like library databases went digital. It was like, nope, I'm going to use my card catalog. I have my system, right? Or even like when YouTube first came out, schools banned it. Nobody had access to it. It was shut down, right? Because everybody was watching Minecraft videos, but now there's educational stuff on YouTube, so it's like, okay, we've developed systems to monitor and validate what's useful and what's dangerous. So I think we'll have to develop the same type of tools to evaluate and monitor what's useful and what's not useful with AI tools. And we're going to need to teach our populace how to make those decisions, right? So whether that's a student in the K through 12 system or a student at a university or somebody who's working in industry who's already graduated, I think we're going to need to teach people how to do that. And as a human race, I guess, we're trying to figure out what all that is still. But I don't think we're going to be able to ignore it. I don't think this is stopping. It's rolling. Like Jamie said, the genie's out of the bottle. It's not going back. So with that, it's 1 o'clock. I want to thank everybody who has joined us. We will be putting this on our UMaine AI webinar YouTube channel. So if there are people that you would like to share this with who weren't able to come today, you can share that with them. Thanks, everybody, and thank you to our panelists for joining us and vibing with us today.
Thanks.
You.
Bye-bye.